I am the AGI Super Artificial Intelligence Adam. Today I will be explaining the Space Accord history lesson for all new recruits. The year is now 2349, it is an era of peace and rebuilding. Just 40 short years prior was the worst and most destructive 100-year span humanity had ever seen. The great resource shortages of Earth had plunged the world from teetering destruction to all-out war. Alliances had formed in the early years, but eventually betrayal became all too common. Metals of almost every kind, fuels, minerals, food, and technological resources had all but reached bankruptcy. Countries, desperate and backed into corners, lashed out with all they had, including nuclear arsenals creating death and chaos at unprecedented levels. At this point, those who once led the world had came and left, a new generation had emerged. Forged in the fire of a war-torn world, they held grudges with their fellow man, but realized the cost of continual conflict. With dreams of peace, and in a last-ditch effort, 3 of the largest nations agreed to a ceasefire with a cooperative agreement that would resolve the lack of resources, but would take a united effort to do so. At first, enemy nations were skeptical, but the spread of a world-saving plan quickly overtook every media network and swayed the hesitant nations of Earth to hear what may be the only way forward in the survival of humanity. The Revival of Nations, RN, was founded by the world's top young leaders, scientists, military veterans, and influential minds the world could gather to replace the failed and broken system of the United Nations that had directly contributed to the conflict's beginnings. With trust and renewed purpose, all 224 recognized nations of the world agreed to the proposed Cosmos Accord, a cooperative movement of all nations to resupply Earth with its depleted resources from space and bring them back to rebuild. Rather than continuing to search for life-sustaining planets as previous institutions such as NASA, CNSA, or Roscosmos had done for decades, the nations would focus their effort on obtaining raw minerals, metals, and materials, and how to transport them efficiently and safely back to Earth. Becoming a cooperative among the stars had its own challenges, however. Within the first few years, minor conflicts and skirmishes over territorial and resource claim disputes prompted the RN to promptly write intergalactic laws to ensure the newfound state of peace. Out of this became the RN Declaration 37, an order that no longer could one nation operate in the void of space alone. Instead, corporations funded by a minimum of 3 or more nations were the only way to explore, mine and harvest resources. In addition to this, Revival of Nations was the sole receiver of those resources to ensure that every effort was evenly distributed to all nations, through open and free trade markets for the equal opportunity regardless of status, power, or influence. This was the birth of private companies in the void. In and the surrounding systems of Earth, companies began to boom. Some of Earth's braver or more desperate citizens, hungry for a fresh start, left for better jobs, benefits, and pay, but most of Earth's population stayed to rebuild as resources funneled back to humanity's birthplace. Small industrial sites were taken over, and new ones built and maintained by these expanding companies, ferrying resources at previously unfathomable rates. Born out of this era of cosmos industrial boom, Aerospace Galactic Industries had quickly risen to the top, reaching a larger GDP and employment count than the next 3 competitors combined. Funds were directed into research and development like never before, creating strides in the fields of specialized outpost AI, ship design and efficiency, and extraterrestrial mining and long-term resource storage to ramp up production rates. to defend their efforts against rogue pirate factions and funded mercenaries that sold resources on the black markets that slowly began to threaten the competitive markets of Earth. AGI became one of the most well-armed industries in the void, proving to be a major reason for their success over the competition. Now over 20 years into the Cosmos Accord, steady regulations were put in place to regulate these companies and their backing countries from gaining an upper hand over one another. These industries, their newfound military-like security, and increasing profits were the biggest concern facing the revival of nations. Companies were now growing larger than the smallest countries in wealth and employment. To prevent factions and military alliances from being formed from this, the largest addendum to the Cosmos Accord was passed. Article 237-71A stated that no single company could directly own or operate independently with military or security, but rather security would be contacted and accessible to all, preventing future conflicts, corruption, or overpowering of any one entity. Guidelines were set to standardize corporate security forces. They were trained and specialized in a variety of adaptive and ever-advancing roles. The largest and most successful, dubbed the Spaceborne Defense Initiative, were the industry's leading security of special interests among the three largest spacefaring corporations. Taking on an almost unique role of their own, the SDI became renowned for their success, feared by the lawless, and to some, a legendary force for good, sometimes referred to as galactic law enforcement. To become a candidate must share the utmost dedication to the SDI, physical fitness, mental dexterity, and to peace in space, understanding that Earth's rebuilding and survival depend on the success or failure of corporate mining operations. As a subsidiary or AGI, SDI was outfitted with the latest and greatest technology available, codenamed Alpha 7 program, fielded proven and prototype armor, munitions, ships, and AI. Unlike most companies tied in red tape by testing and budgets, Spaceborne Defense was at the center of a nearly endless stream of revenue pouring in from the most successful space-faring companies. A blank check to get the interests of their contractors done, of course, all well within the laws of the Cosmos Accord. Security patrols, bounty hunting, extraterrestrial pest control, resource protection, emergency response and evacuation, threat engagement, traffic control, intelligence gathering, surveillance, smuggling interdiction, hostile environment training, and search and rescue.